The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
I'm Shannon Penrod, thrilled to be here with my friend.
Good to be here with you.
Good to see you. You're
Good
looking all like, I don't know, edgy and
edgy.
Well, and sort of Earth Mother and
Right.
edgy at the same
Okay.
time. So I love this. She's.
Thank you.
Nobody can put an outfit together better than Nancy.
Oh, thank
and
you,
I've always
Shannon.
said she's like a Barbie. You could put anything on you and you look fabulous.
Thank you, my dear.
But you do. You put things together well. So we're excited that we're here this morning.
Yes.
We've got a lot of news to cover. And then we're going to have the wonderful Karen Nolte back. We've been having research people on the show now for almost a year. Because Nancy and I, and even today, we're going to talk about some news stories and what I don't want to speak for you. What I know about research and research methods, while it's grown over the years, I'm stumbling over words for things and going,
Right.
And I always go, what's the takeaway? Like because it seems like to me, you get a study and you want to know what's the context and you want to know what's the takeaway and what does this mean long term, and a lot of times I don't have the context for that.
Right.
So Karen's wonderful. She's part of the research team here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and she's got some big stuff that she's going to talk with us
She
about.
can explain it all.
Yes, and she's also very good at explaining it in lay terms. I love that when people don't bury me in more jargon, and she's pretty wonderful about that. So, but first we wanted to start with some news, not all of it fabulous, actually, but we've got a family in Boca Raton, Florida that's speaking out, saying that a school district police officer unfairly invoked the Baker Act.
Which I had never heard of the Baker Act.
I had never heard of this before either, but it meant that they could take her child away, a child on the autism spectrum, away from school in handcuffs.
And they took him to the hospital, where he was then strip searched.
And this poor mom, who didn't find out about this until I guess he was already at the hospital, is the thing. And she's quoted as saying, "I was absolutely frantic. I was out of my mind. I left my work. I ran there. I told them, don't take him anywhere. I'll be there in 10 minutes." But this child is traumatized.
Yeah, he's not gone back to school.
Who wouldn't be?
Right.
And this really points up for me, when people talk about, well, what is a person supposed to do? I think that anybody who has had any training would know that this is not it. Right? I mean, maybe there's 1,000 other things that could have been done, but if you'd had even 5 minutes of training in autism, this would not be the thing that you would do.
No.
So it points up for me, why are we not getting more training? And it's training for everyone. It's training for everybody at the school. It's training for the people that run the lunch line. It's training for the people in the office at the school. It's training for the special needs bus driver. It's training for the police officers. I get it when you think that somebody is going to be a harm to themselves or other people, that brings up all kinds of other things in police officers, testosterone, male or female. I'm not trying to be sexist here, but it does. There's that fight or flight thing that comes up for them about, I've got to protect everyone. But when we're talking about a child, and a child on the autism spectrum,
Yeah, he's 11 years old.
a little bit of training.
Yeah.
A little bit of training.
And this is the second time the attorney said that it's the second time in 2 weeks that a family of an autistic child has come to him seeking justice
It's
from the school.
well, I don't know, like we have lots of friends who are working on this in lots of different directions. I mean, obviously Emily Island is working on it from the police standpoint. We've actually had a dad who is an ex-police officer. He's trying to work on training the police. You know, we have friends who are trying to work on educating schools and to get IDEA fully funded so that there would be, you know, more funding for training teachers and that nature. I mean, you know, we're all trying to work on it. I just would say to parents, if your child, you know, our children are close to graduating from their school situations, but we've slogged it out with schools, have we not,
yes.
Sister Friend? Like, where we had to go in and go, no, you don't have in place what you need to have in place. Look, I am not blaming it on this mom. Not at all. This should not be happening. But I'm saying to all the moms and dads that this has not happened to yet. Get in there, work with your school, make sure that they all know how to behave when your child is having a problem.
Right.
Because stuff happens, and when we leave it to people to decide for themselves about how to react, they react 68 kinds of inappropriate. This poor child in handcuffs, 11-year-old, stripped. What on earth is wrong with people? We're sending out our love to this little man and hoping that he can find his way through
Overcome this.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible, horrible, horrible. Okay, now in happier news, there's a new study that was published last Wednesday in Science Robotics, where researchers are reporting that robots might be as effective in helping our kids with the autism spectrum as maybe therapists.
A therapist, yeah.
And you know, we've been talking about this for a long time because therapy is so expensive.
Right.
And you have to have people, and there aren't enough people. There aren't enough trained people. And we want for there to be more ways that this can be done outside of therapy. We want parents to learn how to do it so that they can do it. But how amazing if we have robots and if they can really be effective. I think the fear is always that the robot is, like if our kids are already struggling with social issues, then being taught by a robot is not really going to feed those. But the
Are they
study
going to become robotic because of that
and the study seems to suggest that that isn't something that we should necessarily be worried about.
No. The study, they analyzed audio and video recordings collected through robots that were tested in the homes of 7 children with ASD, and the computer model was 90% accurate in recognizing when to provide the children with information and feedback about a task.
And if you think about this, I think this is the biggest mistake that we as parents make once our children start ABA, that they'll start out ABA and we see the therapist prompting our kids and saying, do this, or, like try that, or whatever. We see them being prompted. And so we go, oh, well, that must be what works. And then we start prompting. And more often than not, parents over prompt. We do not pay attention to watch the therapist as they fade their prompts. We just don't. Like, we just go, that works, so I'm just going to keep pushing that button and prompting the kid, and often we overprompt. So I love that the robot is able to figure out when to prompt and when not to prompt. Because I know for me, I'm learning still to not prompt all the time. Do you feel that way too?
Yeah,
as a
I do.
parent?
I feel like over prompt.
Well, I think it's every parent. I think that we all do, and knowing that nuance of fading the prompt. Let them have 3 seconds here to figure it out to see if they do it, but not waiting 30 seconds to prompt them. It's a very nuanced thing, but the robot seems to be able to do it. I also love more and more people are working on games and VR games for our kids, for them to be able to learn a wide variety of things. We've had people here on the show from Card Research talking about they created an app to be able to help kids to practice walking across the street safely. Rather than, one of the things that they said was, we want to teach safety, but we don't have as many opportunities as we like, because we go down to the street. And what I want to do is, if I had a perfect world, I would order up, I need a car coming from this direction, but not from this direction. And now next, I'd like to have one coming from this direction. Then I'd like to have 2 coming across, or a car going faster than it should be, so that I could teach all these different scenarios. but they go down to the street and there's no cars.
Right.
Or there's 85 cars, but they're, and they can't separate it out and have one. So they're able to teach in the VR and order up the scenario that they need, and the kid feels like they're there, but we're also not putting the kid at risk. So it just gives them that many more opportunities. I love that they reference here that previous research by the same group found that children who played math games saw an improvement in reasoning, long-term retention of learning, and social skills from learning math from the robot.
It's pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing. I think it's pretty incredible. So if you want to know more about that, you can go to www.statnews.com. All right, and then
let's talk about this show. Everything's going to be okay. You were there last night.
Yes, we were
tweeting.
We participated in their tweet-a-thon.
And you've seen
with
this
the
show,
cast.
obviously.
I love this show. I got to see the show way back last fall because it was going to be playing at Autfest, and I was the moderator for the panel for this show and a short film.
Well, tell us a little bit about the plot, Shannon.
Okay, so the plot centers around a young man who is from Australia, and it's played by Josh Thomas, who is the writer-creator of the show.
Okay.
He is an Australian comedian who is very edgy.
Right.
He is a very edgy young man.
Okay.
And so the storyline is that his dad left his mom in Australia when he was young. So he barely knows his dad. He's met his dad a couple of times.
Okay.
Because his dad went to Los Angeles where he started a relationship, married another woman, and had kids with her.
Okay.
So this young man was living in Australia with his wife, or with his mother. But the dad in Los Angeles has said, please come and visit. I'd like for you to see your half-sisters because they're getting older. And he does have two half-sisters. They're both in high school. One of them is on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
And she is played by a young woman who's on the autism spectrum.
Great.
So beautifully, by the way. So he comes to visit, gets into a relationship with a young man who's learning to be a dentist. Because this is a gay young man, by the way, Josh Thomas's character. And so there's that whole storyline about him falling in love with this other young man and what their relationship is like. But you've got the two sisters, and we learn in the first episode that dad is dying.
Okay.
And he doesn't know who will take care of the two girls.
Okay.
And he wanted to have his son there to have this discussion about who will take care of it, and he says, I'm going to do it.
Oh, great.
He is considered a very irresponsible young man who is not entirely capable of taking care of himself.
How old is he now?
So he's probably 30.
Okay.
And, but he's not good at adulting. And, and the show, the thing about the show is, how most shows you watch and it's like somebody will introduce in one episode, well, I'm sick. Well, then in the next episode, we find out the test results, and then, another episode, they start chemo, and another, and in season 3, they die. This is not how this show goes. Stuff moves fast.
So the father passes away quickly.
Oh, he's gone. And that's how everything in the show is. They bring something up, and it happens that episode. It's right there. It's fast moving, and it does not shrink from anything. So there was an article today.
The article about the girl with autism having sex for the first time.
Yes. And I sat there and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. And last week on the show, we had one of the young women, because there's a bunch of characters on the show. The character who is on the autism spectrum, she has her group of friends, and they are all actors who are on the autism spectrum playing these roles of these teenagers on the spectrum. So, I couldn't help. I got so nervous watching the scene because I know I've met this young woman, she's on the spectrum, and, she is talking about having sex, and then they start to have sex, and I was like, oh my gosh, how did they deal with this on the set? And what was this like, and what were the considerations? And the young actress that was here with us last week kind of broke it down because she's the consultant on set and broke it all down for us about how much respect there was and how slow they moved and how everybody got to say what they wanted, what they didn't want, and that she said it was just her character even had to participate in a kiss and a hug and an embrace, and she was talking about that, and but let me just tell you, if you were looking for something to be like mamby-pamby about it, oh, no.
It's right out there.
They go there. And one of the things that I said when I was there last fall, I said, you know, it's a little shocking. I got to be honest with you, it's a little shocking. And like characters say things and you go, did they just say that? And things happen and you go, oh, are they going to do that right now? And it's crazy because it's, you know, it's very clear from minute one that he's like, you know, he's gay and he is not going to mamby-pamby about that. And they're going to talk about things that do not get talked about on television.
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay, we're going to go there. You know, we're taking, everybody's on the gay community bus. We're going to go there. And then here comes the autism bus and he just goes there. There is no shrinking away from it. It gets discussed. You know how a lot of shows it'll be like, well, so-and-so doesn't have a formal diagnosis. And they kind of, you know, pass over it. Oh, no. There are times when he will turn to her and he'll go, okay, so is this an autism thing? Help me to understand what's happening. Like they are right there. And some of the things that happen with autism, it's right there. Then, you know, so I'm like, oh, it's you know, the gay bus is going, the autism bus is going, and then he brings the Me Too bus in, and then he brings in the interracial bus. They go there in this show. I think it's amazing. I know that a lot of people, it will curl their hair and they'll go, but you should watch it.
And we get this on Freeform.
Freeform. But we were going to talk about this article. The Guardian just the other day came out with an article about this show, and the title of it is Autism, Sex, and Consent. Everything's going to be okay. Breaks ground with a story that rings true. And, you know, I think it's worthwhile to watch. I got to be honest that I have not, Jem has been so busy because he's had so many things going on that we have not sat and watched it as a family yet, but I intend to have him watch it, absolutely, and I think he will think it's hilarious. It's very funny, but it's all, I don't think I've watched an episode yet that I haven't laughed and cried. In fact, I know that to be true. It's very emotional and it's very honest, and you just, I kind of just want to know all of them.
Right.
You know, the characters.
Right.
I've met all the actors and they're really lovely people, but it's so. I think that Josh Thomas is a genius. I'm just going to say that he's a very sweet guy too, but I do think he's sort of an evil comic genius because he makes you laugh really hard about something, and then like you're just laughing hysterically, and then he takes that left turn and you get your mind worked out, and it's very emotional. I mean, even when he's in the car with his dad in the first episode, and you know, he's like, so are we going to talk about this? And the dad's like, let's go get frozen custard. And there's a whole thing about that where you just, it's, you know, because you've been through stuff in your life, in the midst of total tragedy, there's some very funny things that happen. Very funny things that happen. I mean, Chekhov always used to say that, you know, the difference between laughing and crying is 1 second.
Right.
And it's really good, you guys.
Okay, so we'll all have to check it out.
And I think that, you know, I would love to see the autism community supporting it because, you know, I think that Josh Thomas he was pitching shows here in the United States, and he did not need to include a character on the autism spectrum, but it became very important to him to do that. And then,
is there a personal connection to autism that he has? Do you know?
No, but there is now.
Right.
I mean, he said I've been seeing all these things, and that he had this germ of a story idea, and he was like, I don't think people are talking about this in the way that I wish that they were, but then he allowed himself to be educated, and he went forward and made sure that he had actors and actresses that were on the spectrum, that he has people on staff, that all of the actors have said that on set it is the most open conversation about what's happening for everyone so that everyone's comfortable, and that they've all been kind of amazed by it and what an amazing work opportunity it has been for them. And I think it really sets a tone, right?
Yeah.
for everybody who is going to be more and more, we're like, how many shows are there this season that have characters that are
With
on the
autism,
spectrum?
that are played by actors with autism.
Yeah, I mean, and remember a couple of years ago when that had not been done?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, Kobe Bird went in and did The Good Doctor, and I feel like the floodgate opened. And of course, Kobe was there with us last night. He's now on Lock and Key, which if you haven't watched Lock and Key, oh my goodness, Netflix, you got to watch that. And he plays Rufus. And wonderfully so. He will break your heart. He is so delightful in it. But all these barriers have been broken down now. It's funny. I think that if they were to do The Good Doctor now, that and everybody loves Freddie Highmore.
Right,
Nobody wants
right.
to see him go away. But I think if they did it now, they would be talking about having that character played by somebody on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And in just 4 years, that's kind of amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Amazing.
It's new barriers being broken every day.
Yeah, so read in The Guardian, autism, sex, and consent, everything's going to be okay, breaks ground with a story that rings true. But man, it's not all packaged up for you nice and neat. Don't expect that. But expect to be taken on a ride, and I think it's an important show. There was a guy in the audience when we did the talk back who started a gentleman who started to cry. He said, "Thank you for making this show because I feel like you've opened up a door for us to have more conversations."
He was
about
on the
things."
spectrum.
No, I think he has a daughter who's on the spectrum.
Okay.
But he was like, I just feel like everybody got included, and I think that's how I feel about it. I'm like, oh, everybody going on those buses together.
Right.
And let's go on a journey with Josh Thomas, who is crazy funny, and the ideas in his head. Woo! Anyway, there we go. Hilarious. So we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back with the fabulous Karen Nolte. Don't go
Talk about some new research.
Stick with us.
Hey, I'm Candace Cameron Bray.
Tom Bergeron.
You're watching Autism Live.
And you're watching Autism Live.
And you're watching Autism Live.
You're watching Autism Live.
Very cool. Welcome back.
And we're back.
Just talking about the fabulous Christina Adams. But we're here right now, and we've got a wonderful guest that we've had on the show before, a semi-regular. Karen Nolte is joining us via Skype. And Karen, tell them a little bit about what because you hold more than one hat at CARD. What do you do at CARD?
Definitely. I serve as the Research and Development Manager, so I run research projects. I support our clinicians at CARD in learning more about research and learning about strategies that have been done in research to help support their clients. I also have clients of my own, and I supervise their ABA programs.
Wonderful. And so you join us every once in a while. We have somebody from the research team joining us on a regular basis to talk about current research that might be of interest to our viewers. And I think today's topic certainly should be of interest. What are we talking about?
So today I wanted to share with you the research on outcomes of ABA. So it's a pretty broad category of research. But specifically, I wanted to talk about how strong of an outcome you can expect with ABA, what the dosage is recommended in terms of the research. So that's a lot to get into, but I've got a lot of studies to share with you.
Great.
Wonderful.
All right, take it away.
Okay, so there have been a lot of studies assessing the outcomes of applied behavior analysis, ABA, for our individuals with autism. So I'm not going to be able to discuss all of them. There are too many. But I'm going to highlight the major points in the research and talk about some key studies. So before I get into that, I want to define a couple terms. There are a lot of terms in ABA. So first of all, I want to talk about that our ABA programs can be considered either comprehensive or focused. So comprehensive programs are those that teach skills across developmental areas. So this can include language, social, independent living or adaptive skills, which include things like dressing and toileting, motor skills, so that includes fine motor and gross motor, play, and challenging behaviors. So a comprehensive program will typically target skills across all or most of those areas. So in contrast, a focused program targets focused areas. So this is one of those terms that actually makes sense. So for example, maybe one individual's program is focused just on play and social skills, and maybe another individual focuses on challenging behaviors within their program. So another term that some of your listeners may have heard of is EIBI, and this stands for Early Intensive Behavior Intervention. So this is kind of a subset of ABA, but there are several key features of this type of ABA program, and the first couple are in its name, so it kind of makes sense. So the first thing is early. It's delivered early, typically as soon as a child receives a diagnosis, ideally in the preschool years. It's also intensive, meaning it's 25 to 40 hours a week, which is a lot for a little kid, but we've got a lot of research that I'll get into to show the support for why we want that many hours for our kiddos. It's also grounded in behavioral techniques. There's some other features of EIBI that aren't in the name. It's comprehensive, so that's the term I mentioned earlier, indicating that skills targeted across domains within the program. It's individualized for that individual child. It's supervised by a trained professional. Treatment goals are guided by knowledge of child development. It starts in terms of being provided one-on-one and then can fade to a group format. And this last one is really important. Parents and caregivers are really actively involved. So those are just a couple terms that I thought would be helpful before I get into some of this research.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Wonderful.
So among the research on ABA more broadly, EIBI has the strongest research base, which is why I wanted to spend some time defining it. So in terms of the guidance and the number of hours that we should provide for our kiddos with autism, the strongest guidance is within this EIBI subset. So the first study in this area that I want to talk about was conducted in 1987 by Dr. Ivar Lovas. And he was one of the first to show that ABA techniques could be used with children with autism to lead to great outcomes. So in his study, he provided one group of children with autism with this EIBI intervention. And they received 40 hours a week of one-on-one therapy for 2 years, at least 2 years. The control group did not receive this treatment and instead received the regular services a child would receive at their age, maybe school, things like that. So after 2 years of the study, 47% of the treatment group had achieved average IQ scores. This was an amazing accomplishment for them. And that same 47% were in regular classes in school without any support. In contrast, only 2% of the control group received those outcomes. So this was the first study to show this. It was really exciting, but a lot of people were skeptical. There was only one study, but since then, his research has been replicated many times. However, not all the studies achieved the outcomes that Lovas saw, but all of them did see significant improvements for the kids. So to help us make sense of studies when there's lots of studies conducted on a given topic, researchers sometimes conduct a study of studies, and they're called reviews, where we look at all the research out there on a given topic to get a clear picture of what the takeaway is or what the summary is of that body of research. So there have actually been many even reviews conducted in the area of EIBI, but I'll highlight one that was conducted in 2010 by Viras Ortega. He analyzed 26 studies that assessed the outcomes of those EIBI programs and found that children who were in the treatment group receiving the EIBI services had strong improvements in terms of their IQ scores and communication skills improving, and they also had some moderate improvements in terms of their daily living skills and social skills improving. So it was really exciting to see all of these reviews show really strong support for EIBI, which is 25 to 40 hours a week of ABA services for our kids.
Well, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, so I want to move on to talk about school a little bit. I know a concern many parents have, especially when their kids are young, is school. Shouldn't my child be in school? Well, researchers studied this. In 2014, Howard and colleagues reported on a study where they compared outcomes for 3 different groups of children. So one group received that EIBI, that ABA instruction, in multiple settings. That was done in school, in home, in the community, for an average of 35 to 40 hours a week. The second group attended a class specifically designed for kids with autism for 25 to 30 hours a week. So it was pretty similar in terms of the number of hours, and it was a program specifically for autism. The third group attended a general special education classroom, about 15 to 17 hours a week. So it was a little less in terms of the intensity. But what they found, regardless of the location here, they found that the children in the EIBI group had significantly higher scores after 1 year treatment than both of the other groups. So even though the kids in the EIBI group were receiving similar hours to the kids in that autism classroom, the kids receiving that ABA in the EIBI group did significantly better.
And those kids were not in school?
The services were partly in school, partly in the community, and partly in the home. So I don't know the breakdown for each individual kid, but some of it was done in school.
But they had therapists with them in school, working with them one-on-one.
Correct.
Okay.
It was not just the child in the classroom on their own.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And 61% of the kids in the EIBI group had average IQ scores, which is huge. That's amazing. So this and other studies really show that what matters more than the setting is that ABA and or EIBI is provided. So our kids can receive services in school if, EIBI is done, if ABA is done in that setting.
Now, Karen, maybe this is outside the question here, but I think a lot of times people are confused about what ABA is going to look like in the school setting. If it's that they have an aide and the aide is ABA trained, we're counting that as ABA.
Yes, that is ABA. EIBI is a little bit more focused than that. So EIBI is focused on specific skills, focused not just on academics, which may be part of it, but also focused on language skills and social skills. So in order to be really considered EIBI, that aid is not just helping the kid in the classroom, but that aid is helping the child use their language more, talk to their peers, play with their peers, engage socially, raise their hand to, ask the teacher a question, those types of things.
Okay. All right. So is it me? I mean, we've been dipped in this for so long.
Right.
And obviously we felt very strongly when our kids were little and diagnosed that we needed ABA.
Yeah.
And we fought for and got pretty comprehensive programs as early as we were able to, which, that's always a problem about
Right,
how early
exactly.
can somebody get it. But so all of this just, for me, corroborates what I've always known and been told. But for parents who are watching who are new to this, I imagine that I feel like we sort of lost that story along the way, that we forgot about telling people, oh, by the way, science is what shows that this is what's effective. But that's really what all of this boils down to. Am I right, Karen?
Definitely. There is not just one study, but there are many, many, many studies that are replicating the same thing and telling us over and over our kids need intensive ABA early on.
Yeah. But schools are really doing a wonderful job, I have to say, of saying to parents, oh, no, I've heard parents all the time, they go, oh, no, your child is so high functioning, they don't need that, just bring them to school. Or, no, your child is so severe, ABA won't do anything, just bring them to school. And school gives this wonderful, they go, if you think about what the deficits are for autism, it's deficits in language and it's deficits in social skills. And if your child is just sitting with a therapist doing one-to-one, that they're not going to address those two things, you should bring them to school where they're working on social things and will work on language with them, because we have a speech and language pathologist, and the parents don't know.
No,
And
of course not.
And you get the speech and language pathologist for 2 half-hour sessions.
2.5 hours a week.
Right, where your child gets taken out of the social situation to go to that, and parents are always left with this well, did I miss a bus somewhere? Did I miss the train to get on? And they don't know. But school really does a good job of selling it to them that they don't need early intensive behavioral intervention. It makes me mad. I don't know if you can tell.
I know.
But clearly, this is showing that if you really, what I just heard you say, Karen, tell me, I always count on you to be my check, but if you really believe the school and say, okay, I feel like school is the best place for my child, and for some kids it is, but that early on they should be there with an ABA trained therapist, yes?
Yes. Definitely. And the next study I was going to talk about actually highlights that exact combination. So I'll jump into that if you
Okay,
like.
great. Go
Yes,
ahead.
please.
Sure. So, not only talking about school, but, sometimes our kids get diagnosed a little bit later. Not all of our kids get diagnosed in the preschool years. So there were some researchers in 2007, Ikaseth and his colleagues assessed outcomes for kids who started treatment a little later, between 4 and 7 years of age, and they implemented this treatment in the school setting. So one group received that EIBI for about 28 hours a week in that classroom. And the other group received special education support for 29 hours a week in that classroom setting. And after treatment, even though both had the same number of hours, both were in school, the EIBI group, again, had higher scores in terms of IQ and adaptive skills, and those scores maintained when the kids were older as well. So if the parents really want the kids in school, it's so important that EIBI and ABA of some sort be done in that setting.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's encouraging news that the kids that were a little bit older still had the positive outcome.
Right.
But all the more reason for parents to go to their IEPs, participate in their IEPs, bring a tape recorder with you, and ask for free appropriate public education and say, here is a study showing that my child will do better if there is a therapist that's there and that we're using the principles of ABA. Now, parents are always confused about how to do, so you say this and you go, so here is the thing, and and here is the research, so I've showed you I've asked you for what I think is appropriate, now you tell me what you think is appropriate, and please show me studies that show that the increase, and that's where you got them, because there aren't, right, Karen? I mean, do you know any?
Sure.
I don't know any.
No.
That show, and listen, people will go, well, we don't have the responsibility to provide the best. That's true. You have the responsibility to provide what's appropriate, but you can look up appropriate in the dictionary and find that at least in one dictionary, because I did this, it says effective. Appropriate is effective. And if I'm showing you a way that's effective that has research behind it, please return the favor and show me the research that shows that your way is effective. That's how you get an aid.
But many times the school will say they will provide their own aid.
But you have to ask them, can you show me the research that shows that is effective? That your aid is appropriately trained? Because remember, and you just keep trotting the word appropriate out. Show me where your aid is appropriately trained and that you have research to show that your aid is appropriately trained. They don't have an argument for it, Nancy, because there isn't one.
Well, they feel that their aides are appropriately trained.
But do they have the research to show it? That's where we have them.
Right.
So where can we get this study, Karen, so that people can take it with them to the IEP?
I can post it somewhere for you. I don't know if you have links on your website. I could definitely send the link to you.
We can definitely share the link on our Facebook underneath this page. Underneath this show. So that would be fabulous. Wonderful.
Great.
Wonderful. Now, did you have more, or was that the cherry on the top?
One more piece that I wanted to share.
Okay,
great.
I talked about how EIBI was really between 25 and 40 hours a week. So does it matter if your child receives 25 versus 40? And the research shows us that yes, it does matter. There was a study completed by Lindstedt and colleagues in 2016 that showed that children who received more treatment hours learned more. And there was no point of diminishing returns, meaning no point when it stopped showing that increase. And they did some analyses, assessed other variables, including age and parental involvement, and really found that the treatment hours alone, the number of treatment hours alone, accounted for a large portion of how much a kid progressed in treatment. So those hours, every single one, really does matter.
We were talking about this on Wednesday with Dr. Grampuchet, that I see this more and more as I'm talking to parents, and I'm always pushing parents and saying, do your full prescription, whatever it is. Every child is different. You got do the full prescription. And there's this phrase that parents are saying to me, and it's like they all got together and had a meeting, or somebody's been feeding this to them, where they go, I don't really see what the difference is between, and they'll fill in whatever the two numbers are. The number that they're doing versus the number of the I don't really see what the difference is between 19 hours and 27 hours. It's really not that much of a difference. I don't see what the difference is between 10 and 20, or I don't see what the difference is between 15 and 35. And it makes my head come off and fly around the room and spin several times, because first of all, I just don't understand that logic. But then the other thing is that I always reference is compound interest. If you understand compound interest, you would not make this argument. But I guess a lot of people don't understand compound interest. So while you were talking, I Googled, because the way do you understand compound interest?
Yes.
I didn't understand it. And somebody said to me, all right, and this is, they're saying to do it with 10 cents. I was always taught to do it with $1. But they say, okay, we're gonna play golf. And golf is 18 rounds. And so let's have a little friendly game where we're each, and I was always taught it that was $1. I'll bet $1, and you bet $1, and whoever wins the first round will win the kitty. And then every time that we do it, every round, let's double it. And so the question is, how much money do you have at the end of 18? And people go, it's like $36. It's not. It's like $1 million. And the analogy that they have here is that you do it for 10 cents a hole. 10, and at the end of 18 rounds, it's $13,107 from 10 cents. Because every time you're building on where you were before. And so if your child has 10 hours of ABA this week, and they accomplish this much, and now you go to the next week and you're starting on the basis of that, and you get to build from there, right? And so now you're going to take that and you're going to go further over. So if you start with 10 or you start with 20, and now you're adding this to the next week and that to the next week, you end up in a different place. So I feel like it makes me crazy, Karen, when people don't recognize that more is better. What do you say to them?
I agree completely. And to add to what you're saying about the compound interest, our kids with autism are not only having to learn the skills from, in the 4-year-old year, they not only have to learn a year's worth of skills, they have to learn more than a year's worth of skills to catch up with their typically developing peers. So they have to learn faster than their peers do to catch up. So that compounding interest is so important in helping them catch up.
Yeah, it just makes me crazy. And I always reference, we had a mom about 1.5 years ago that was, she had twins. And she was going to bring them both to the center, and it was a Saturday session. And she came into the session, and one of the twins, their therapist was there, and they started and they did therapy, and they had an amazing day. And when she came to pick him up later on, he had learned the color red, and he had learned how to say excuse me, and all of these great things. And he was walking tall, and he was so excited that he'd learned these things. Well, the other twin, she brought them both at the same time. The other twin, the therapist had been in a car accident. We didn't know it at the time, but the therapist wasn't there. And then when we found out, it was like, oh, unfortunately, your therapist has had an accident, so it's last minute, we don't have a replacement, and that child got sent home. Now, first of all, he was like, why don't I get to stay?
Right.
Why don't I get to learn? But now she's got twins that on this day were in the same page, but now one gets therapy and one doesn't for just one day. Because people cancel all the time and they go, it's one day. What's one day going to be due? And so she picks up the other child. He now knows red and how to say excuse me. Well, the other child doesn't. And so now they go back the next day, and we've got therapists now. So the first child learns blue, but they're still teaching the first child red. Right? And so she said, this mom was hysterical. She was like, well, I desperately need to catch this other child up. I can't have him be behind. We can never miss another day of therapy. And I say
good that she realized that.
Yeah, but I say this to parents all the time. Like, you don't have a litmus that shows you, look, this is what my child would have lost.
Right.
But if you cancel, you've canceled the progress.
Right.
Makes me crazy, Karen.
I agree.
And the research bears it all up. This is not just me making it up.
This is solid research now.
Solid research. It's not anecdotal from parents. Karen's got the good stuff. So was that the last study?
Yes, that is everything I was sharing today.
Well, thank you, Karen.
The takeaway,
more is better.
More is better, and 'cause
Intensive and early.
intensive and early, and we were saying on Wednesday with Dr. Grampichet, she was saying if your insurance has said that they're going to pay for it, just do it.
Right.
Just do it. Take advantage of it, because a lot of times parents go, well, we'll do it next year. Next year will be more convenient, but you can't get the insurance funding next year.
Right.
Because they will give you less than what they would. If you don't do it, they're going to give you less. So, Karen, thank you for backing up all these things that we say on the show, so that people don't just think that Nancy and I are in left field.
Of course, I love to do it.
All right.
Thank you, Karen.
And if people have questions about this, where should they go, Karen?
They can, I can send you my email. I'm more than welcome for them to email me.
Okay. So I think what people should do is, because we give out my email all the time, if you have questions about this or any other research question, write to me at s.penrod@autism-live.com. Specify that it's a research question, and then I will forward it to Karen, so that Karen or someone on her team can address that for us, and then the next time they're on the show, they can talk about it. So s.penrod@autism-live.com. Karen, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
So we're going to take a short break,
Yeah.
and then we're going to come back
We'll come
to
back.
finish out the show. Stick
Okay.
with us. Parent to parent, having a compliant child is one of the greatest things on earth. But frequently we ask ourselves, why doesn't my child listen? Well, here are some tips to help us to get a listening, happy, compliant child. First, we want to make sure that we make compliance worthwhile. Whenever your child does something that's compliant, make sure that you praise them and heap rewards on them that are meaningful to them, things they really want. One of the things that we have to be mindful of is that if the child isn't compliant, we have to praise more often. Just heap it on. If you say to yourself, there's nothing to praise, they're not doing anything that I want them to do, then ask them to do something that they already want to do. This is a really tricky way of being able to praise them. And then, of course, the last thing that we want to do is catch them doing good things when they least suspect it. And make sure you heap that praise on, because having a compliant child is one of the best things in life. Token economies are a great way to get to good behavior with your child. And welcome back.
Welcome back. We were talking about voting a couple of days ago.
And my family, we had to wait in line for 2.5 hours. I was just telling Nancy that the first polling place that we went to, we meant to go earlier, but stuff happened. We couldn't do it. The first polling place we went to, there was a long line, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Let's go to and here in California, you could vote at anyone you wanted to. And I was like, well, let's go to the one closer to home.
Right.
And so we went to the one closer to home, and the line was around the corner. And I said, let's go to another one. And Jim said, that didn't work out. And I said, let's go to dinner and come back. And he goes, I have a feeling this is just going to be
just as bad. Yeah.
And he said, let's put in the time, let's do it, and let's stand in the line 2.5 hours.
2.5 hours?
And always, since Jem was little, he was just a couple of months old, and in the little baby carrier that you put in your car, I took him voting with me every time. I took him when he was 4. And couldn't stand, and had the leash on him, and I was like, no, my child has to be here to see me vote. And we weren't supposed to take him with us, but circumstances changed. He waited in line with us for 2.5 hours to watch me vote, and he was like, I'm really kind of done with this, Mom. But he watched me vote, but it was crazy. And we got in line at 4:30, and we got out at 7:05. So it was just a little bit more than 2.5 hours. We were starving. They were handing out free pizza in the line.
Well, that's nice.
And the line. So we went and got dinner. We picked up dinner, and we were coming home, and it was very close to our house, just a couple of blocks away. And we went by, and I guess I wasn't thinking. I was like, what are all these people doing in the streets? And why? There was double parking, and so by that point it was a good 7:30, and the polls were supposed to close at 8 o'clock, and it was it was a school, and so there was this very, how the school sits on the corner, but the entrance is a long way from the corner, so there's the line, and then the line went back, and then it went around the other block at 7:30.
That's amazing. I didn't have that long of a wait. I had like 20 minutes.
But you went earlier in the day?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I think that, you know, that expression that they always say, vote early.
Yeah.
Vote early and often is the joke. You know, I said two things to my husband. I said, we will, in November, we will vote early and we will volunteer. Because I saw that they just didn't have enough volunteers, that it could have moved faster if they had more volunteers. And, you know, and I said to my son, and you will volunteer too, because I see that sometimes young people don't vote, and I just don't understand that.
Right,
I'm
right.
like,
Looks like a lot of young people came out for this election.
yeah, and of course here in California, it's always like it takes forever for results to come in, but because not quite as bad as Iowa.
Right.
Have we ever heard finals from Iowa yet?
I don't know. I never heard them.
I don't think we've heard actual. I mean, I think there's some places where they said, oh, we'd have to redo it.
Right.
Craziness. But anyway. Yeah, that's what we were talking about. But hey, we're just about out of time here, and I want to talk a little bit about
what's
some
coming up.
Okay, so on Monday we have Contessa Cooper. She is the creator of Unpuzzled Community, and she's going to tell us what that is. Very excited.
Unpuzzled Community.
Unpuzzled Community.
Okay.
And then on Tuesday we have a best of episode that we're going to be showing to you. On Wednesday, Dr. Doreen will be here for Ask Dr. Doreen. And then on Thursday. It says here that we're doing an oldie but a goodie, but I think we're pre-taping Thursday's show because I can't be here on Thursday. But I actually think we're changing that too, Traven. I think the production meeting in the works. So I think we're actually here on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. And then on Friday we have Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy with guests to be revealed. So that will be next week, and we'll be thrilled to be here. We're gearing up for April.
Yeah.
There are so many events that are happening in April. It's here in Los Angeles, it's tough because a lot of people have chosen to have their events on the same day. And that's just always the hardest thing, I think, for us is that there are so many things in that first weekend. All things that we love and that we're trying to, I mean, we just had Larry Hauser on the show yesterday talking about the Fullerton Cares thing, but here locally in Los Angeles, Dina Kimmel's having her We Rock the Spectrum walk on that same day.
Glorious Pies will be there.
Yes. And
Wyatt's working the
he
event.
working it? So I guess I know which event you're going to.
Right,
then.
right.
And we love that event. And then the day before that is the Autism Partnership Conference that Dr. Jonathan Tarbox is presenting at. I mean, there's just all these amazing things to do, and of course, more things coming up as the month comes along. I sort of love it. That there's all these things and there's all these opportunities. I don't know. Is it me? I sort of feel like it'd be better if we spread them out throughout the year.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough to do it all in 1 month.
Well, and it feels like, yes, it's tough to do it all at once. And it feels like it's like, oh, this thing that we now have to get through, this gauntlet, instead of the warm fuzzy of the thing when you go to just one event, you get a boost and you go, okay, I can do this for another year. So I don't know. There have been a lot of people who said we don't want just a month for autism awareness.
It's a lot to cram into a month.
It is a lot to cram into a month. But, in any case, we are about out of time here. So, or are we, Traven? Do I have more time or not? Oh, we have 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
We have 5 minutes.
What do you want to talk about?
Well, since we were talking about this with Karen Nolte, I would love to go through, we had a theme a couple of weeks ago that was the myths of autism.
The myths?
The myths of ABA.
Okay.
That so many people think, oh, it's this or it's that or it's whatever. And I think one of the big myths is that you can just do 15 hours when your prescription is 20 and that it's all the same. So, but what are some things that you've heard people say about ABA over the years of people who aren't doing it?
People who aren't doing it?
Yeah, like it makes me crazy, full on crazy when somebody writes into us, not that they're making me crazy, but the people who talk to them will say to parents, your child's too high functioning. They just, you don't want to bother doing ABA because your 3 or 4 year old is so high functioning, don't bother doing ABA. That makes me go nuts because that's criminal. First of all, like ABA has shown to be so wildly effective with those kiddos that it's, and that time can never be quite made up later on. And it's just criminal when people are giving bad advice for that. But then there's the opposite where people will say, you know what, your child is too profoundly affected. ABA is not going to help them.
I've heard that.
It just makes me
Yeah,
mad.
that the child is where they're going to be and they're going to have the same outcome anyway.
Right, so
regardless of
don't put
whether they
them
have
through that
ABA.
frustrating
Right.
thing, and you know, and they'll expect, you know, these from you and from your child, and you know, just accept that your child is where you're at. And look, I believe in acceptance. I absolutely believe in acceptance, but it's this thing of we send our kids to school because we expect that they're all going to learn and grow. And when people say to, you know, oh, accept where your child is and don't give them the best teaching that there is, I believe that that boils down to, you know, you should give up. And we know that that is not the truth for anybody, that every single kiddo makes some progress.
Right.
Everybody's not making the same progress. Nobody is saying that, but all, kids make some progress. And I remember years ago watching a video that was put out by the New England, it's like the New England Children's Autism something, I'm messing up the name of it. But it showed kids who had participated in the original LOVA study that Karen was just talking about. And it showed them years in the future, so they were teenagers. And it showed 3 specific kids. And because there were 3 specific outcomes of the LOVA study. There was a group of kids who made so much progress that you couldn't tell them from their neurotypical peers, right? Then there was the group of kids that were in the middle that made a tremendous amount of progress. You could still tell that they were on the spectrum because they still needed some support, but their lives were greatly enhanced, and that they could, you know, work jobs and have friends and so on and so forth. And then there was the third group of kids who were had comorbidities, which meant that they had more than one diagnosis. So maybe they had autism and Down syndrome, or in each case in that third group, they had a diagnosis of something else in addition to autism. And those kids still made tremendous progress. The most progress that they made was in the adaptive area, that they were able to work jobs. They were able to take care of themselves, dress themselves. They were able to have functional communication. They didn't have challenging behaviors anymore. They weren't throwing tantrums. They were a part of society and a working part of society. That I remember they showed 3 kids, and with the 2 kids, they showed them with their neurotypical peers and said, try to pick out which one is the kid that had ABA. Pick out, and so there was one group of 3 boys that were working out in a gym, and they didn't show us their faces, but we got to hear their conversation and see everything that they did. And they said, can you pick out which is the kid who had the diagnosis of autism and was nonverbal? And I couldn't pick out the kid. I couldn't tell which one. Then they had 2 boys that were a little bit younger, that were probably like 14, 15 years old, that were hanging out together and playing and talking, and you got to see their faces. I couldn't pick out which one was on the autism spectrum. And then they showed a third person who was in that category of the comorbidities, and they interviewed both him and his mother. And they said to the mother, you know, people have made the argument that because there are still some kids who don't make that tremendous progress, that maybe ABA is not that effective. And she was like, are you out of your mind? Like, they were talking about institutionalizing him, and now, like, you know, he's probably going to live with us or live in some sort of assisted living his whole life, but I know he's going to be okay because he can say, that person hit me. He can set the dinner table. He toilets himself. He, you know, his chores are, you know, and they showed him setting the dinner table, and the pride that he took in setting, and she was like, if you think that that's not a big deal, you don't understand where we were at before. And my child was on the floor, hitting his head on the floor, and not able to tell me, I would like more juice, please. And she was like, you know, you've totally missed the boat if you don't think that this is something that's really, really important. And that really struck me. So I'm so mad when people say, oh, this kid is too high functioning, or this kid is too low functioning.
And I hear from some parents, they tried ABA and it wasn't for us. It just was not, it was too restrictive, it was too robotic, made their kids into a robot.
And what do you say to that?
I say that they didn't give it enough of a chance.
Well-
If they say it just wasn't for us.
And I try to be respectful of people, and like what I want to say is, we all went through the phase of thinking, I don't know if I can do this.
Right.
Every single one of us went through that phase, but you gotta ride that out. That's what I want to say. I don't want to make parents feel bad about the choices that they've made, and I don't want to come off like a know-it-all. So often I'll go, oh well, different strokes for different folks. But if I see a parent who's in the middle of it and trying to decide, I go, for heaven's sake, don't do that. And what I say to them is, go to an autism event and meet all of the kids and ask the families, what did you do? And you'll see at an autism event that there's the spectrum, right? There are the kids who are, doing really well and that are working and doing all these other things. And then there are we've been to autism walks, right? Where they have people who are 25 years old and they're in a harness attached to a tether so that they won't escape. A 25-year-old, right? But ask the parents, what did you do? What worked? What didn't work? Go find the scenario. Go, look at a kid who is like your kid in some aspect and say, what did you do? That's what we did years and years and years ago when we were in the tough, and I was like, I don't know, this ABA thing is a little bit hard. I don't know if we're cut out for it. And I'm not a follower. I'm like, well, let's change it a little.
Right.
I want to do it my way. I'm a little bit bossy. But I remember Bonnie Yates had an event. I don't know if you were at this because I don't think I knew you then. Jem was still in an umbrella stroller. That's how little he was. But she had an event where it was called Stories of Recovery, and she had a panel of 10 parents whose kids had recovered, and that's the word that they used, and some people still use, that they no longer qualified for an autism diagnosis. They had at one point and no longer did. And so it was 10 parents whose kids were doing remarkably well. That's all I cared about. And they went down the line and said, what did you do? What did you do? And it was fascinating. But every single parent said ABA. That's the only thing that they all agreed on. One parent said, I did ABA and we homeschooled. And another parent said, I did ABA and we did biomedical. And another parent said, we did ABA and we had a great OT and he was in a sports program. And another parent said, we sent him to a tutor, but we did ABA. The one thing in common was that they all had done ABA intensively. All of them. And for me, that was it.
Right.
I was like, done. I'm good. Because most of their kids were either in college or going to college or, and I was like, I want to sit with those people. And I'm lucky because I get to sit with those people. And that is not the case for everybody.
Right.
Right? And I hear that, but I still go back to that mom who was like, no, the fact that he can toilet himself and set the table,
Big gains.
You don't know where we were.
Right.
So anyway, now I've talked through.
Now we're out of time.
We're out of time.
Okay.
All right, there's the soapbox. Love you guys. Hope you guys have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And yourselves a hug from me.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.